Welcome back to DukascopyTv. Joining me in the studio once again is David Smith, and we're going to be taking a look at the main events causing ripples in the market. David, thank you for coming in.
Pleasure to be with you once again.
Excellent. Now, if we look at the Jackson Hole meeting to begin with, European shares have plummeted in anticipation of the meeting, but what are you expecting from it?
I think once again there will be relatively little that comes out of the Jackson Hole meeting. I mean, there are so many key issues which are in suspense. There is a forthcoming decision of the Constitutional Court in Germany. There is the machinations in Europe where everyone is seeking free money from everybody else. So I don't really see that there's going to be any tremendous transformation apart from getting a few beautiful days of sunshine in the Teton Mountains.
Now, the situation in Spain does seem to be deteriorating, 0.4% contraction in Q2. How do you see this situation developing?
Well, I think Spain's problem is not necessarily the contraction of the economy, because it's contracted radically already. If you take a situation where there's unemployment amongst young people living in the south of Spain exceeding 50%, you'd have to say that there's a pretty bad recession going on. The main problem with Spain is a combination of liquidity and solvency. The solvency is pretty clear that the central government is insolvent. It is also clear that the banks are completely illiquid. If you look at the moment at the amount of money that's been borrowed by the Spanish banking system from the ECB, we're talking about an amount which exceeds 500 billion euros, which is a colossal amount of money for an economy which is in its totality not all that much more than $1 trillion. Sorry, $1 trillion euros.
Now, this is obviously an election year, and as such the campaigns are on everyone's mind, but how do you think it's affecting the global decision-making process?
Well, I think at the moment we're in a phase of paralysis by analysis, and Jackson Hole is a very nice place to be paralysed. I think essentially the games that are being played by Obama is to try and make sure that there is no destabilization in the coming weeks. The game that's being played by Merkel is also a waiting game. The game that is being played by Mr. Draghi is also a waiting game. So I think this can go on for quite a while yet. The real crunch time, I suspect, which would be still in the pre-election period from an American point of view, is in October, because in October Spain is expected to find and refinance approximately 50 billion euro of borrowings, and that is an amount of money which in today's condition I'm not sure the market can absorb. At that point there are very few choices open. Either you have an EFSF which is actually functional, or you have Mr. Draghi step in with some kind of emergency measures. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Okay. Now, with regards to the ECB again and back to Europe, Angela Merkel and the ECB continue to be at odds with regards to policy. How do you think what impact do you think this will have, especially in light of the upcoming meeting?
Well, in some ways they're diametrically opposed. I mean, this is a very easy image to give, is to say that they're fighting like cat and dog. But in reality, they both want the same thing in different ways. If you take the ECB, it would very much like to transform itself into the Fed and acquire all the powers that the Fed have at the moment. Angela Merkel would like to have control over Europe and do it on her own without necessarily the involvement of the ECB. Don't forget, Angela Merkel, she was brought up in Eastern Europe at the time of the Stasi, so her idea of democracy is perhaps not exactly what you and I would see as democracy.
Okay, and obviously Germany were the latest in a long line to feel the pinch of the crisis. What are you expecting next for their economy, would you say?
Well, I think an awful lot depends on how these problems are resolved. If things go extremely badly and for some reason the Eurozone really goes into a tailspin, then Germany is going to be very badly affected as well. But as they say, they are probably the least vulnerable of the economies out there at the moment.
Least vulnerable, but what do you think of the notion of the Teflon economy? Is that out of the picture?
No, I don't think they've ever been a Teflon economy. I mean, the reality is about 4 or 5 years ago, they embarked on a serious restructuring plan because they recognized the global threats that they had. They've cut back on people's pay. People in Germany are working extended hours for relatively modest income, but at least they're living within their budget, and Germany is facing up to realities that Eastern powers such as China are going to be the threat for the future against which they have to combat. If you take many other countries in Europe, they've carried on in a completely blind way, assuming that the old practice can continue. So Teflon it certainly is not. They've battened down the hatches and are actually preparing for the future instead of waiting for disaster to strike.
Okay, so a bit of a preemptive strike then. With regards to the Constitutional Court in Germany and the decision they're going to take with regards to the EFSF, what are you expecting between now and then?
Well, I expect behind the scenes there will be tremendous political pressure put on the theoretically independent judicial part of the American system, of the German system. You know, politicians say, you know, we should never let constitutional issues get in the way of what the government wants to do, which is a complete defeating of the purpose of having a constitutional court. Where it is going to end up, I would be very, very surprised if at the end of the day the judges say a formal, complete, flat rejection, because the consequence of doing that would be so dramatic. If it reached the point where there was a categorical refusal to participate in any future bailout fund, then I think that would have to be the end of the euro.
Well, let's hope they do find a solution before then. Let's hope that's not the case. But David, thank you very much for your insight today. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. That's all from David and myself for the moment. Later I'll be talking to Daniel Glasner, CEO of Action Finance, so do stay tuned for that. Goodbye for now.